So I want to just begin with an introduction of our two guests. Well, one of them is not really technically a guest, but we'll talk about that. Can you guys hear me through this? It's pretty good? Okay. So today we're really blessed to have Andrea and Jan with us. And I'm sure you've seen Jan around a lot. Jan and her husband, Charlie, and their daughters, Kate and Nora, have been parishioners here for 6 years. And they both teach fourth grade Sunday school, and that's where Charlie is right now, holding down the fort down there with his ukulele, and they're probably leading that. And just a little bit about Jan. Jan is the development director at Imagination Stage, which we most of us know and love. And then previously, Jan served as the senior director of corporate communication at PBS. So that's a little bit about Jan. And then Andrea Chamblee has been to St. John's a couple of times for a few events that we've had. And Andrea, if you have seen her in the news recently, you might recognize her face. She is the widow of John McNamara, who is one of the 5 victims of the Capital Gazette shooting in Annapolis a year ago. And actually, just to make the connection, Jan is the sister-in-law of John as well, because Jan's husband, Charlie, is the brother of John McNamara. And so they're sister-in-laws. And this month, you would be celebrating 34 years of marriage with John. So a little bit more about Andrea is that she works for the FDA, and she also she teaches at George Washington School of Medicine and Public Health, and volunteers with Moms Demand Action and with the Gun Violence Survivors Network. And I told Andrea that I wanted to start today by asking her to tell us a little bit about this book that she's been working on, because I want to promote it to you. I think that some of you might really appreciate it. So, Andrea, would you tell us about it?
Thank you. For the past 13 years or so, my husband was working on a book about basketball in the Washington, D.C. metro area. It's a thriving city for basketball. We've produced more Hall of Famers and more NBA players than any other city in the world. And there's a wealth of talent and athleticism in this area, and he's interviewed almost 200 coaches and players, and we stocked their yearbooks and got pictures that no one's ever seen before, and I was able to finish it, and it's called The Capital of Basketball, and it's coming out in November, and there's some cards there if you're interested, and we're really proud of the book. It covers 100 years of basketball in Washington, D.C. And I want to say that the religious schools in this area are just a world-renowned hotbed of basketball. And it's really also a story of civil rights as well, because you could keep black kids out of the golf courses and the tennis courts and football and baseball, but all you needed to play basketball was a basket on a street corner. And black and white kids played together, and they used the same bathrooms, and they drank out of the same water fountains. So when it came time to desegregate the schools, it was really the basketball players that led the way. You might have seen Remember the Titans, about how tough it was for football, but in basketball, the kids all knew each other, and they would walk, before Metro, they would walk like 2 hours to play somebody in Northern Virginia. They'd walk across the bridge for a good game. And so I hope that that's something you might be interested in. It's a real labor of love, and I'm happy I could finish it.
Thank you, Andrea. And you also started a scholarship for John, I believe, at UMD. Is that correct? Yes.
At the University of Maryland, there's a sports writer scholarship that is going to award its first scholarship shortly. And it's endowed for every year, and if you're so inclined, you can donate to that as well.
Thank you. All right, so we're really honored to have the two of you spend time like this with us. As you both know, we've, as a church, have been taking more and more intentional steps toward gun violence prevention. And we see this as just a wonderful, integral part of our conversation, especially because many of us are, like you, everyday ordinary people with busy schedules. And oftentimes we think to ourselves, what can ordinary people do to make a change? And so I hope that we're going to get to a point today and just hear from your experience about that. But I know that this conversation also involves Moms Demand Action pretty significantly. So I just wanted to start broadly. How did you get connected with Moms Demand Action?
Well, actually, I joined because Andrea did, honestly. But I will say that, and she should tell us about that, but I will say that I didn't, so John was killed on June 28th, and I didn't get involved right away with anything having to do with gun violence, partly because we were reeling, and also because probably like many people here, I still didn't know, what can I do? And is getting involved just creating more noise? Because there seems to be like a lot of noise, but not a lot of change around this issue. But when I thought about John especially, but also Aberdeen, which was a mass shooting in Aberdeen, Maryland that happened in September that got almost no attention. It was a workplace shooting. It happened at a Rite Aid distribution. And there was almost nothing about it, even though it wasn't even 90 days after John and the Capital Gazette folks had been killed. And then I thought about the fact that my daughter's school had sent out a note that a young graduate who graduated from the school where she goes in 2015, he had been killed. His name was Giovanni Little. He was 22 years old, an African-American man killed in Fort Washington, Maryland. There was no attention. So that's really what got me thinking about, as someone connected with the shooting that people had actually heard of, because there are so many the sort of day-by-day violence, as well as the headline grabbers, that it was time to step up. And Andrea was already involved with Moms Demand Action, so I just followed her lead.
Yeah, I think like a lot of you, it was on the periphery of things I was concerned about. I had already learned that we happen to live in an area that's a hotbed of gun trafficking. The states of Virginia and Florida supply most of the guns used in illegal actions up and down the East Coast. And that's why Mayor Bloomberg started Mayors Against Illegal Guns to try to lobby those states to limit their sales, at least to state residents. And that has not happened. But so I knew we were in a hotbed of that, and those guns fed MS-13 and other terrible crimes with firearms. Arizona supplies most of the guns in the West, including most of the guns to Mexico. They come from Arizona. So our country is a supplier of these firearms for illegal things. So I was aware of that on the periphery. But of course, when this happened, I decided that, what I went through was just so unbelievable that I just need to stop it from happening to anybody else. I heard that people were promised this would be life-changing, and I want to say, I want to promise you that it's not life-changing, that you never have to go through this. It's changed the way I sleep, it's changed the way I eat. It's changed when I work. It's changed what I do when I don't work. It's changed the food I buy. It's changed the drugs I'm on. It's changed the side effects from the drugs I'm on. It's changed every aspect of my life. And I really don't want it to happen to anyone else. And I think back now that I'm remembering the question, I think it's important to join a group as organized and formidable as Moms Demand Action, because they can get stuff done. And Maryland is a great place to do it, because people tell horror stories about these laws that are being proposed, about how it's the first step in coming for your guns or something like that. And if we can get them passed in Maryland and show that they work, we can disavow all those tropes about gun violence prevention.
Because I do want to add that the Moms Demand Action is very consciously modeled on Mothers Against Drunk Driving. And what appeals to me about that was, clearly we need to change the laws of this country, but probably even more, or they go hand in hand, we need to change how we think about gun violence. And Mothers Against Drunk Driving really did that. They didn't just get laws changed about drunk driving, but they changed how we think about it and how we behave. Nobody talked about a designated driver when I was a teenager, but now we do. We've really changed the way we think about how our actions impact others and how we can make a difference. So I really appreciated that. And they're super practical. They know you're busy, and we'll talk more about that, but that is my main message. Super practical. I have a sheet over there about that where they list out what can you do if you have 2 minutes? What can you do if you have 10 minutes? Because we know those are the increments in which you live your life, because everyone's got a lot to do.
That's wonderful. I'm really looking forward to that practical piece of it. When I talk to people who have navigated an illness, either for themselves or a close family member, they often say to me, you wouldn't believe how much I know about things now, like about how to navigate the medical field, or like all the ins and outs of how your body works, because they've had to, now they have a vested interest in really learning about what it is. And I'm sure that along the journey with Moms Demand for Action, you have learned so much about legislation and what's happening out there. And I'm sure that if you were to go off on it right now, we would get lost somewhere, you know, in terms of all the different things. But in a nutshell, what is it that you're advocating for, or that Moms Demand Action is advocating for, so we can wrap our minds around it?
We talked to one legislator earlier this week. This isn't a year-round job for them. They have, if they're lucky, they have one part-time assistant. So they know if you call, they know if you email, they know if you write a letter. They know it personally, they see it. And she said 100 to 200 calls in a session in like 3 months will make a legislator change their mind. So if you can be one of the people that make that call, and by the way, your household, everyone in your household can make that call and really get us over the hump. So if you call, if you email, you can make a difference. And just say this is important to you, this is something you're concerned about, and you support legislation. And there's a website at mgaledge.com. So I think of it as Maryland Government Administration, but I don't know what it really is. mga.maryland.gov. And but if you Google Maryland legislation, you can find it. There's a link to gun legislation under its own topic. So you can say you support by the bill number, and that in itself could make a huge difference.
But I'd also say absolutely all true, and we're really talking about Maryland legislators, because of course living here, it's a little confusing sometimes. Like, are we talking about U.S. Members of Congress or Maryland? So we're really talking about Maryland. Again, Moms Demand Action. I am gonna sound like an Amway salesperson up here, because they are so good at this. If you text join or commit to 64433, they will send you back a text, and you can give them your zip code, and they will actually tell you the kinds of things that we're working on. A main thing that we were working on this past session was background checks for long guns. So if you are to buy a gun in Maryland and from a licensed gun seller, if you want to buy a handgun, you have to get a federal background check. If you buy a long gun, which was the type of gun that was used at the Capital Gazette, you do not. You still do not. And yes, I see the surprise. Thank you. Yes, you still don't. And we went to testify for that, she in the Senate, I in the House. But we got close. So with some dedicated, organized, focused action that we can tell you more about, we can get it done, because we got really super close. And as frustrating as it is that we didn't actually get it over the line, it just means we just have to get a little bit further next time.
Yeah.
So that's a big one. There's also things you hear about red flags, which is basically people who have known crimes shouldn't be able to get a gun. Seems reasonable. Some states have it. I think we should all have it.
But red flag also applies to somebody, say who's feeling suicidal or has threatened their romantic partner or something. You can contact the police, and they'll talk to a judge, and they'll make sure there's evidence, and they will take those guns away until more of a procedure can be held and decide if they get their gun back. So the red flag laws have saved a lot of lives already. A lot of military people who are suicidal. So if you want to support our troops, these laws are really important. And it also helps with domestic violence. Someone mentioned, this is the civil rights issue of our time. People who are threatened with firearms are people of color. They're women in domestic violence situations. They're LGBT people. They tend to be people with no place to turn when they're threatened, which also affects whether these numbers of how guns are used in crimes are even right in the first place. Because if someone's being threatened with domestic violence, that person doesn't report it most of the time. So these people are desperate and need our help, and I think it's the civil rights issue of our time.
Well, can you tell us a little bit about the obstacles that you've encountered? What are some of the counter arguments or some of the excuses that you've encountered that are preventing common sense gun legislation? What we would consider to be common sense gun legislation.
I like to say that it's not about the arguments, it's about being argumentative. It's not, we've all heard the arguments, you've all heard them. We've been saying, you've been hearing them constantly since Columbine. And when if you ask yourself, but how would they respond to a grieving family member? I can tell you that now. It's, I'm sorry for your loss, but. I'm sorry for your loss, but, and then they go right into the arguments that you've all heard. A lot of them are, for example, because I brought it and I circled it on my sheet because I wanted to make sure I got it right. So when I went to the House to advocate for the law we were just talking about, long gun background checks, keeping in mind that the State House, where this conversation is happening, is merely 4 miles away from the Capital Gazette offices. Delegate Hartman from Wacomico County said, this was after a presentation had been given, it was very clear why we were there and what we were talking about. He said, long guns account for less than 5% of the crimes that have been committed so far as murder and so forth. We have knives accountable for 13% and hands and feet at 5.6. How do you see this bill making Maryland safer when it's such a small part of the crime? Now, I'm not even conceding the correctness of that answer, that 5%, that long guns actually account for 5%. And I will say the Johns Hopkins doctor who was testifying said, actually that number doesn't even take in the suicides that are completed with a long gun, which in rural areas is a lot because that's what's available. But just if you're wondering how a Maryland delegate responds to something like the Capital Gazette with not only a family member in the room, but 2 reporters from the Capital Gazette who are not asking for anything but are still there to do their jobs, that is his answer. 5% is not that much.
And I think it was him that said it was just 1 or 5 people.
That was the Senate.
That was, right, that was in the Senate. Somebody in the Senate said, oh, just 1 or 5 people was killed this year, knowing that 5 people were killed in a single incident one year. So they lie about the numbers. Even I went to the NRA webpage because they put my picture on the front page one day as a troublesome, annoying. Thank you. I went there, and they don't even complain about this bill's substance. They say it's another step in the hostility for guns in the United States. So they don't even stoop to complain about the bill, but they know that their supporters will. One person said, we're criminalizing gun ownership, even though this bill doesn't say a peep about gun ownership. If you own a gun, it doesn't affect anything. But they said it criminalizes gun ownership when it criminalizes, I guess, selling a gun without performing the background check.
And as you can tell, this is probably our favorite topic to talk about. I mean, in terms of like what we feel
It's so
about.
exasperating.
I brought this picture, and I'll put it up there because I know you can't really see it. But this was when I went to testify. Behind me are a bunch of people in white T-shirts. They read, "We will not comply." By that they mean we will not comply with whatever, because they obviously didn't make that shirt just for me. Their group, they're called Patriot Picket, and they go to hearings like moms do with red shirts, and they wear white shirts, and they say, we will not comply. And it's that attitude, the sort of whatever it is, I'm against it, I'm not even going to talk about it, you're just trying to criminalize guns, you're just trying to penalize responsible gun owners, you're just, the Second Amendment, all of the things, again, that we've heard. But the bridge that they take is really fast. You'd think there'd be a pause for breath. There's not. So that's really frustrating, but it also means the reason they work is not because these are logical arguments, but because they are held onto very strongly. So that also means that something like Moms Demand Action, where an organizing and getting our voices heard is what it's going to take. Because these arguments aren't strong because they're strong arguments, it's just because people are holding onto them very strongly.
They're loud.
And
we need to be loud
and we
back. And
right.
I went to one house for the Congress, and they had 2 gun rights activists there. George Mason University has a NRA-funded position there of a constitutional instructor. I won't call her a scholar. And she was repeatedly asked what were her constitutional arguments against background checks. And she hemmed and hawed, and the questioner finally said, it sounds like you don't have any. So you don't have a Second Amendment right to buy a gun without a background check. It just doesn't exist. And they raised the Second Amendment constitutional, be a patriot argument, but there's no leg to stand on for that one either.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I feel like
So-
we have a right to vote, but we have structures around it. We have a right to free speech, but we have libel laws. You know, so anyway,
Your,
been going all day.
your determination is like very inspiring to me. I can imagine that many of us would just get discouraged coming up against a bureaucracy like that, and just seeing how someone with that much power can just sabotage movements, you know, because they just have the power. And I think that one of the things I'm hearing is that, and I've thought about this a lot actually in the context of other types of events, is that oftentimes people tend to intellectualize other people's suffering. Mm-hmm. And so here you are, you've had this life-changing experience that if you could change, you would, you know, and do over and just warn John, you would just like this, and yet you had it. And so you come across people who just say, I'm sorry, but, and they just intellectualize it. And I really just want to ask, how do you not get paralyzed by the anger that you feel toward the bureaucracy, or does that happen? And how do you move past that to get up again and do it over and over again? I know that's off script,
Right.
but I just,
That's okay.
I'm done.
I would say that, yeah, this is life-changing. I really don't want it to happen to anybody else. There are moments when my faith is really shaken. I mean, before this, I had my share of crappy moments in my life, like all of us. But this was certainly puts those other concerns to shame. But the people of Annapolis stepped up and donated to a fund for our families. One of my students came to my house with 3 bags of groceries and a broom and cleaned my house and all the dead flowers that were there. She swept up the dead leaves and filled my refrigerator with healthy food. And I posted a picture of all the mail in my house that had piled up. I had a pile from the insurance company that denied my claim, by the way, because I couldn't prove I wasn't the shooter.
She got it fixed.
Because they can't pay a claim to the shooter, and the shooter is almost always the romantic partner. And they said I had to prove I wasn't the shooter, and the coroner's report is sealed, the police report is sealed. I just have the death certificate that says he was shot and where. You don't want to get one of those. And so I called the telephone number on the denial letter, and I said that I have some friends at the Washington Post who want to do a story on insurance companies and how they treat mass shooting survivors. And I got a call back in like 5 minutes from the vice president that says, please don't call the Washington Post, we'll pay you your claim. We Googled your name, and I thought, how many people died in Vegas? 60? And another 60 shot? They're not listed in the newspaper anywhere. How are they getting their life insurance claim? So, but I'm getting off script again, but people rose up to help me. Oh, so I posted this picture of all the mail, the bills that hadn't been paid, the bank statements, the police reports, and there was another pile. Anyway, I posted this picture of the piles on the internet, and 18 people came to my house with file folders, bagels, and filed it all for me. And then I meet Moms Demand Action. I meet these women whose kids were shot 15 years ago and they're still going, trying to be heard. But they're black and they're from Baltimore, and people blame them for living in the city, and they keep going. So I have to, so the people who've risen up to help me, and you guys showing up today on Mother's Day, kind of restores my faith in humanity. So thank you for being here.
I would also just say the fact that I think about this picture a lot, and not these people in particular, and you know they're all brothers and sisters, of course, but that idea that you know when another shooting happens and they keep happening, and if your media diet is like mine, you have a lot of everything from reporters to your friends on social media going, what is it going to take? How are we still here? What can we do? And these aren't rhetorical questions to me anymore. And as frustrating and angering it is, I feel like, but now I know what I need to do. And now and thanks to moms, or groups like that, I have a way to do it. And that's helpful, though it's still hard. And it shouldn't happen to anyone. And it's hard that we live in a society where something like this can happen and it kind of becomes part of the wallpaper because there are so many. My next door neighbor, when I told her the next day what had happened, she was really hit hard because she had read the story. She lives next door to people named McNamara, and I don't say this blamingly, she of course never occurred to her that that meant someone she knew. So she was sort of doubly struck by the realization that this is my neighbor, and that I read the story and I thought, oh, that's really sad, and then went to the next sad thing in the paper, because there are a lot of them. And I think that's part of the problem, as you say, intellectually, there is so much of it that it's hard to kind of wrap your mind around it on an individual level. So I think it's another reason why because we are visible in a way that others are not, that we feel a responsibility to do that.
So before we open it up, tell us about what people will find on this table.
So we have a few things there for you, and which I thought I had copies of, but I don't. But that's okay. But there is my favorite sheet, which is the what can you do, with a breakdown minute by minute, which is very helpful because again, moms understand that people are busy. There's also a flyer there for Wear Orange. You might have heard of this in the past, that it's basically an awareness raising activity that is going to go on all over the country, wearing orange, because it's a color you can't ignore. And there are going to be lots of events all over the country. This one is going to be on Silver Spring, June 7th. It's going to be a block party and a unity walk. And there's also another sheet over there that lists some of that same information, and also some of the wins that have happened in the first part of 2019. Because as frustrating as our experience has been on some level with the long gun bill in particular, there have been some major wins, both in Maryland and other states and on the federal level. So that means that it's working, that we can break down the sort of ingrained narrative. It's going to take time, and it's going to take effort, and it's going to take organization, but it's happening.
And there's a card over there for John's book and scholarship. And one thing I left off that I need to say is one of the people that most restored my faith in humanity is Jan. Oh. She's been tireless. She's been always there. She's been helpful. So I just want everybody to know that that she's been terrific.
Thank you.
You're lucky to have her.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
We're gonna open it up for some questions. I already see some hands up, and just make sure to wait for the microphone to get to you, because it's being recorded, and that way we don't miss a question, Bill.
Okay. I'll also just point out, I think this is an emotional topic, and we seldom have time for all the questions that we have in the audience. So I'll just pose your question briefly, so that we can have a chance to get to everybody. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Becky Neal. I grew up in Annapolis. I looked forward to getting the Gazette at 5 o'clock every day. And my brother's pictures were in the sports page. And I just want to say just what you said, that of all of the shootings when this happened, it hit close to home.
Yeah.
And I really felt it in a way that these are my neighbors. So I just wanted to say my heart goes out to you. Annapolis is an amazing town, and I'm so glad that they gave you the support you needed. And thank you for your work and your efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Sean Craig, and I have a question about the role of social media, because it has changed the whole dynamic of this. It kind of creates this contagion between events of gun violence. And this is a broader issue. There's a lot of discussion now about the role that these social media companies, Facebook and so on, need to play to try and kind of control or manage this dark side and try and cut off this contagion. It's not just this, it's your terrorism and other kinds of things. And I just want to understand perhaps what your view of that is, and what your organization sees as, if your organization sees a solution, part of the solution as being, as dealing with the phenomenon of social media and violence in our society.
Sure.
I can do.
Well, one thing you might notice, I'm sorry.
Go.
One thing you might notice that we haven't mentioned the name of the person who committed the shooting, and we're not going to. And that's one advice. That's a piece of advice we've gotten not only from moms, but also from that she's gotten from the prosecutor's office in an attempt to not glamorize and further spread the fame, if you will, of people who committed. Because you're absolutely right, it is contagion. We are seeing copycats. There's no question. People have others who have committed such acts have said, now Thousand Oaks. Now I'm going to be famous. So that's a huge issue. Also a huge issue for everyone's safety is that it's very easy to look up mass shootings and get some information and frankly get some tips. There was a woman a young woman, and she is a woman, she was 18, but she was still a high school senior. This is right around the Columbine anniversary. She traveled from Florida, where she lived, to Colorado, and she was planning to hurt people. And she looked up on the internet, how can I get around the gun laws in my area so I can get a gun and do this?
She asked a question and people answered it.
On Reddit.
On Reddit. So there's one of the evening comedy news shows did a segment on how social media is a toilet. And there are certainly times when it is. I remember when Elliot Rodgers killed a bunch of women in Colorado, I saw pages saying Elliot Rodgers was a hero and women be bitches. We should all be killed. So I reported those pages and Facebook said it was not against their terms of service. So I looked up their terms of service and I cut and pasted the provision that said you shouldn't do that, and I sent it. And they still said it was not against their terms of service. So there's a lot of bad stuff in social media. And it's good people can find their tribe on social media, which is great, and Nazis and bad people can find their tribe on social media. And when Reddit starts getting a crackdown, then people just go to 4chan, and when 4chan starts a crackdown, there's now 8chan. And so there's always a home for these horrible, horrible people. I'd be interesting to hear from the presidential candidates that want to break up Facebook. I'd like to know more about it. But the dark web is, I think we just have to overtake cruelty and evil with kindness and gun laws.
It's like, it's like, so we'll keep bringing back, because this is the thing that gives me hope, so at least I can go back to, but we can work on it together. We can, we can be forces for good in this, and we have the tools.
Yeah, the New England Journal of Medicine did an article, just 3 simple things that will make a statistically significant difference in gun violence. One is the emergency risk protection orders, which we have in Maryland, but we don't have federally. Another is close the long gun background check loophole, which we were trying to get in Maryland. We're almost there. And the third was something else. Let me see. Anyway, they were 3 pretty simple ones. Reinstate the ban on military-style weapons, which we had for a decade, and they let expire. So if you can just make calls when those 3 things come up, that would make a big difference.
And there again, Moms Demand Action will tell you when that's going to happen. So you don't have to keep track of this. You don't have to, they will actually let you know, and they will help you know who to call, by zip code.
They'll send you a text with a telephone number. You click on the phone number on the text, it goes through, and you can just say, I support House Bill number 12, and you've done your good deed for the day.
And they'll send you information so you don't have to blindly follow Moms Demand Action. And I have found that, when I check out what they are asking us to support, that I agree. It's very common sense, very doable, certainly not going to infringe on anyone's rights, and the things that they want to do. I grew up here, but I spent a lot of time in Charles County. My dad was a hunter, and I understand that that's a big part of life, these are not the things we're talking about, and enjoying hunting and other sports, they're not incompatible at all.
Scott, before you ask your question, I just want to do a quick follow-up. When you make that phone call, are there ever situations where interrogate you on the ins and outs of the bill.
No.
So you don't have to prove that you
No.
know the bill. You just have to say,
Correct.
this is what I support.
Right. They just say,
So,
exactly.
okay, great.
They might ask what bill number you
Right.
want,
Right.
so they can make sure to check it, because they'll keep track. So, but Moms Demand Action will tell you what bill number to say.
Okay, great. Scott?
Yeah, you mentioned a little while ago about, you mentioned the word hero. A lot of these folks see themselves as good people versus bad, and we have this hero worship in our society. You see it in movies where there's good guys with guns and bad guys with guns. Some of the people who are standing behind you at these hearings really view themselves as good people, which is what leads people to think we need to give guns to teachers because teachers are good and crazy people are bad. How do you combat that sort of just binary view of this issue as not being one of good people versus bad people, that even the good people who have guns really need to be the ones who are doing the advocating, not the people who have been the victims? Because for them, if they're a victim, they try to prevent themselves from being a victim by having a gun. And their answer to others people's victimhood is get a gun. Yep. So how do you get these folks with guns to acknowledge that more guns is not the answer to the problem?
Mm-hmm. Sure. I think that...
Unless you want to.
Go ahead.
A couple of things. First off, the folks that, if you're willing to wear a "We Will Not Comply" t-shirt, which again to me says I'm not having any conversation with you because I'm against it all, I can't really reach those people. I'm told over and over again that most people don't support the Patriot Picket position. I do believe that. For example, even the NRA will tell you that 70 to 80% of their members support background checks. So this is an unknowing, but I think small group. And there is certainly, so that's number one. I don't think there's a lot of them. So I think, again, getting more people who have a more moderate view, which I do believe is many more people, but getting them heard is what's really important. And so I don't think to answer your specific question, I don't think I can convince those folks, but I don't think I have to because I think there's more people in the middle. I would also say that there are so many situations where you see that just the availability of guns is clearly not making us safe. If making guns really available made people safe, we would be a really safe country because there are a lot of guns. So, but we're not. So that's clearly not working. So we need to look at something else. You hear a lot of people in gun violence prevention talk about the idea of comparing the model to cars. Cars are dangerous. They're also useful. They are also fun. They're also a huge part of American life that many of us can't imagine living without.
Alcohol. Alcohol is too, and it's never been easier to get a really crappy IPA. Mm-hmm. And you can tell I don't like IPAs, and I can't get anything else anymore. Right. So we can regulate it heavily, and it's still widely available with the right culture.
But it's going to probably take a system of things, like with cars. We have everything from safety requirements when you make the car, to speed limits, to speed traps, to drunk driving laws, as I mentioned earlier. There's a lot of, trying to make roads safe. There's a lot of sort of things. So, and I think we need to talk about that and work on that together as a country, but we can't do that because we can't get past this wall in the first place of whatever it is, I'm against it. And that's why I'm very focused on that.
Yeah, I agree. We're not going to convince those people. Mm-hmm. I had a talk with somebody that says, but you want me to protect you. And I said, no, I don't. I don't want you to protect me. I would rather go down in a country where our children don't get mowed down in school, sacrifice me for that than have you and other people determined to protect me at the risk of them being shot by a police officer who thinks they're the active shooter. And the evidence is clear that having an unlicensed civilian with a gun does not make anyone safer.
I mean,
it doesn't make their children at home safer, it doesn't make their romantic partner safer, it doesn't make them safer, it doesn't make people around them safer. It just does not work. But they do not want the data. They're convinced that they are the exception to the rule.
And I'll just to build on that, but just to say, because we are in a situation where there are so many shootings, there is data about everything. Everything I'm going to do with shootings in this country has data because there's an example of every single kind. So when she says the data is clear, because people have checked. And it's true.
Right, and let me just add that there's something that the We Will Not Comply people do when the legislature is in session. They call it Man Up Monday, and they show up in Annapolis for the evening session. So they're visible and they're heard. And if we can have a Moms Up Monday with men warmly invited,
Right.
or at least just make phone calls and send emails and be present, that would make a big difference.
We have time? Yes.
Yeah, we got plenty.
Okay, go near the beginning of everything you said, which was all. Hello?
Just hold a little
Hello?
closer.
Can you hear me now, Ann?
Yeah.
Okay, great. You mentioned that the state legislators only work part-time, that they know if you call or write, and it takes 100, or if 100 or 200 people call, that's enough to influence their vote. And my question is, does that apply to any state legislator and any caller, or is it 200 calls from someone in their district?
Their district. And that's a great question because, and frankly, probably 200 calls probably isn't going to convince Delegate Hartman, the gentleman who made that comment. He's from Wacomico County. But it would be a start.
You never know.
Exactly,
I
it'd be
mean,
a
there
start.
was one delegate who changed his mind,
Yep.
and he said, and he voted for the long gun background check, and he said it was the best vote he ever changed. And he actually called up each of the people who called him against the bill and told them what was in it. And he said he convinced almost all of them when he told them there's no gun confiscation provision in it, there's no criminalization of gun ownership in it. It's just to perform a background check on every long gun sale.
Right.
And they said, oh,
Well, that sounds
okay.
And to give him a
So
shout out,
calls
that's
from
Delegate-
anywhere can be
yeah,
helpful.
Exactly. So that's to give him a shout out. That was Delegate Brian Crosby from St. Mary's County. So again, change is possible. The mom's leader in that area really worked, really called him, but also having people call. So change can happen, and at the local and state level is really where a phone call here, an email there can really make a big difference.
It's like voting in the midterms or voting in your local election. Your voice is amplified exponentially because there aren't a lot of other people there.
So I find that if I'm opposed to someone or something, if I understand more where they're coming from, I have a better standing. I have a better way of speaking. How in the world did the NRA get to be as powerful, and why?
Money.
Money, Russia, money.
No, sir, it's money, and it's money from the gun manufacturers and ammunition manufacturers. That's really it. And many people will tell you, who know more about the history of the NRA than I do, that there was a time when it was, it was sort of a
sports
club. It was a sports club, and it was like, and it promoted safety and how to use a gun responsibly, which is what I learned. My dad was a hunter, so I know how to use a gun safely. I don't now, but I don't own a gun myself. But as a child, and that's how I learned it, and that's what the NRA was about. And then money became involved, and so when Sandy Hook happened, for example, Wayne LaPierre, who's hanging on to the NRA leadership by a little bit, but he's still there. When he said, you probably remember this, the only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun, and most people went, that's insane. And he was roundly criticized everywhere, all around the world.
Almost everywhere.
Well, exactly, but, exactly. In terms of, exactly, in terms of probably the media diet that we probably consume, but NRA membership went up, sales of guns went up, sales of ammunition went up. So so that part of it too is like they're speaking to their crowd. And obviously Delegate Hartman says what he says in that hearing because I am not, even though I'm a Marylander, I'm District 16, and he is not. And so that's a big part of it. So there again, so if you know anybody in Wacomico County, I would like to give you a phone call to call Delegate Hartman. Because that's what will work.
Yeah, and one thing I heard about, which I guess it didn't happen personally, that there was a time that may or may not be continuing now, that when you purchased a gun, you got a free NRA membership.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And I suppose it was like 1 year, and then you got billed after that. It wasn't completely free forever. So people who got a gun were drafted into the NRA and maybe got the sporting and gun safety stuff and discounts. They got discounts on travel and other things, although a lot of organizations have stopped giving member discounts. So it was like AAA. So they got memberships from anybody who bought a gun, and they got their contact information and their names and emails. So they were able to get members that way. But there was a time after Kennedy was shot when the NRA president testified in Congress about how people should not be able to get a gun in the mail. And of course now you can get a gun on the internet, and they've changed their position. But they used to be much more moderate, and now they're not, because that's not where the money is. When there's a big shooting, people are worried about gun law changes, and they buy their guns to stock up. When there's a black president, they buy their guns so that they have them when the confiscation begins. And now there's a president that doesn't worry them so much, so membership is down a little bit. And I think it's easy to get complacent about that, but I think if there's a Democrat in the White House again, it's going to go back up.
I'm reminded of a passage in Scripture that says, that the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And it's interesting to see this at play. I want to throw a question out. Anne this morning made an incredible announcement from the podium, and she was announcing that next Sunday we're inviting any of our parishioners who own guns to come and join a conversation about gun reform, and just to really help us understand what is it like to own a gun, because we don't want to be, another parishioner said to recently, like, if you had a baking group but they've never baked, right, and they're advocating for something, you want to bring in the bakers so that you can know what it is. My question is, would this move be more powerful if it was combined with people who were advocating for change, but also here, like having people who own guns advocating for change? And to what extent does Moms Demand Action incorporate the voices of gun owners?
Yeah, there's a subgroup. There's a subgroup of gun owners, and for the long gun background checks, as Dan said, 70 to 80% of gun owners believe, most of them have had a background check. They want the gun owner next to them to have had a background check. So yes, we want them, and I think it's significant to me that orange, for the Wear Orange Day, is the gun safety color, right? You don't go out hunting looking like a deer, right? You wear your orange. So we embrace gun owners and their support in our group.
Right, and there are a lot of people in Moms who are ex-military. The interfaith conversations for gun violence prevention, which Margaret Hilton has been working so tirelessly on, organizing with Temple Sinai and Bethesda United Baptist. We were there last week with a gentleman from Giffords, which is the group being created by Gabby Giffords and her husband, and they really are trying to reach out to gun owners because they are still gun owners. And he was a former ATF agent, so we were there to kind of hear, especially from someone in law enforcement and specifically alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. So that was very interesting. But I was literally sitting next to the two people from Moms that I hang out with a lot in Annapolis. One is Pete, who is a man enough to be a mom, who is a Vietnam veteran, and Bridget, who's a 20-year Navy veteran, and certainly a gun owner. So it's not either or. It's not be a mom or be a gun owner. But it's really very inclusive. There are a lot of gun owners in Moms. Again, I think people like me who, in a way, who have a background in it, who understand that it's important to be safe with guns.
We have a lot of sheriffs who support us 100%, and there was some implication at the Maryland State hearing that the sheriffs who aren't supportive, like Wycomico County, actually get funded exotic game trips funded by the NRA. So I wonder, they probably have a lot of gun suicides in their district because that's what's available when you're in rural areas. And I think there's people that are in law enforcement that don't support us. I wonder where they're getting their money for these exotic game trips that they seem to be able to go on a public servant salary.
But I just want to say one other thing, though. But when we, Andrea and I, have gone to, say, Senator Zirkin's office, one of the first things we hear is, well, we have a lot of hunters. Again, as if they think it's either or, and it's clearly not. or you need to have gun. We've been told you need to have gun owners on your side. So again, even though they're gun owners in moms, certainly, we need more people who are ready to say, as a gun owner, as a retired military, and they're there, but we need more because those words need to be said and they need to be heard.
Right, and they don't always know how important it is because they take their own status for granted. So we have a lot of them, but they don't think to say, I'm a gun owner, and...
That's powerful. And that kind of goes back to your question, Scott. So I'm really glad we fleshed that out a little bit more. We have time for one more question. Megan, right here.
What do you do to raise your empowerment and outreach?
To raise your...
So what do we do to raise our power and join moms?
Join moms. Show up. Yeah, text. The number is 64433. And you can text if you're a student, text student. If you're, you can text commit, join.
You can text right now. I have a sign. No,
we won't be offended if your phone is out because you're texting moms to be induction.
And I literally have a sign-up sheet over there.
But I can't emphasize how easy they make it and how respectful they are of your time.
What do you type in when you?
So 64433.
And then what do you write?
And you can text just the word join or the word commit. And by the way, you can also, because I know this is important, we're all busy, you can also put text, if you get tired of it, you can text stop, and they will stop. Mm-hmm. So it's very easy, and they will respect your time and respect your wishes.
And if you're a student, I think if you text student, they'll hook you up with Students March for Our Lives as well, because they've joined forces. That's a really powerful group. And not just gun violence prevention, but there's a lot of voter suppression laws that are coming up. They are scared of these crop of 17-year-olds that are going to vote in 2020. And when you look, I don't know if any of you needed to get your real ID, but if you're in the gig economy with no W-2, and if you're living with your parents and have no utility bill in your name or something, it's really hard to get your ID now. So as I said, I think this is a civil rights issue of our time, and there's a lot of issues that are associated with it. But I know we're in a busy area, and you don't have to be a full-time advocate to really make a difference. I can't be a full-time advocate, and I'm getting kind of exhausted. So I could use everybody here to step up, tell your friends to call, rally everybody together to make a difference.
It really does help, and because Moms has a lot of people, we were able to have a huge presence in Annapolis on an ongoing. It's only a 90-day session, but Moms had people there a lot because there was a lot of them. And you would see on the Facebook page that they have, I can only be there from this to this because I've got a life.
That's fine.
And that's fine. It can really suit your schedule. And again, if you can never make it to Annapolis, because it's not like it's next door, there are lots of things you can do otherwise. Please do them. Yeah.
And? Yeah.
Woody Allen said 90% of life is children.
Yeah.
It really is.
I actually have a message.
I went to Annapolis.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm very impressed with that organization. But every legislator we met with said, wow, there's so many of you.
Yep.
More
They noticed.
people. Because the other side, I'm afraid, is turning out the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, we went on lobby day. We had 300 people there on lobby day. It was one day off, and if you couldn't take the whole day off, that was fine too. I heard legislators complaining about how they couldn't get an elevator that day. And that's what you want. They remembered that we came.
Right. And they remembered that there were twice as many. So this year, there were twice as many as last year. And they also noticed that. So not only did they notice the numbers, but they also say, and it's so much bigger than last year.
Which was so much bigger than the year before.
So we want to keep that momentum going. It's so important. It's so impactful. I know for everybody who's busy, you're like, I have so much to do. I need to know it's going to count, and then it's going to matter. This counts. It will matter, and the tools are there, and they're really easy to use.
Andrea and Jan, I feel empowered.
Good.
I feel inspired. And I just want to say thanks for believing in us. And our prayers continue to be with the two of you as you journey through this and simultaneously continue to work through your own grief around John's death. We're so blessed to have you with us. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for coming out on Mother's Day. Thank you.